All right. If you haven't already, everybody, please mute your mics. And welcome to the second and final Q&A for the 2025 Gateways to Blue Skies competition. My name is Amy McCluskey, and I am part of the Blue Skies competition management team at the National Institute of Aerospace. We support NASA in planning and executing this competition each year, and we're really glad to have you all here. This session serves as an additional touch point between teams and the competition co-chairs to ask any remaining questions you might have. As a reminder, this session will be recorded and posted on the Blue Skies website. If you need captions, you can access them by selecting More in the toolbar, then Language and Speech, and then turn on Live Captions. Today, we will briefly review the context for the 2025 competition before opening the floor to questions. This time, this Q&A session will be an open call format, so be prepared to raise your hand within Microsoft Teams. We'll call on you and you can turn on your video and microphone to ask your questions. Alternatively, you can ask them in the chat. Once all questions are asked and answered, or at 4:30, whichever comes first, we'll wrap up the session. As far as our agenda, we'll do some introductions, go over the context for the 2025 theme, discuss the proposal and video expectations, as well as programmatic reminders, and then we'll open the call for questions. Here you'll see our Blue Skies program staff at the National Institute of Aerospace. As I mentioned, I'm Amy McCluskey, and I support the Gateways to Blue Skies competition with Stacy Dees. Our boss, Shelly Spears, oversees all the education and outreach activities for the National Institute of Aerospace, including Blue Skies. You'll be interacting primarily with Stacy and I during the course of the year. You can email us, call us, and you'll see us at the forum next May if you're selected as a finalist. Gateways to Blue Skies is sponsored by the University Project within NASA's Aerospace Research Mission Directorate. Stephen, would you like to make a brief introduction to yourself and your role within this competition?
Sure. My name is Stephen Holes. I'm the Gateways to Blue Skies lead for NASA, and I'm the assistant project manager for our university innovation project here on the aeronautics side of the house for NASA. And so it's my job to try to figure out what our topic is every year and to assemble a team of experts and working with the NIA to make sure this competition runs well. So I will be our main co-chair and judge along one of my colleagues you'll probably meet in one of the next slides, Brad. So I'll stop mine there.
All right, thanks, Stephen. And team selected as finalists will likely meet Kaushik and Mina at the May Forum. Mina, I think you're on the call if you want to say hi.
Sure. Hello. I'm Mina Capuccio. I hope to see the 8 finalists at the forum at Armstrong and look forward to seeing proposals.
Excellent. Thank you, Mina.
I think Kaushik was able to join us as well.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see that. Kaushik, would you like to say hi?
Hi, everyone. Really encourage you to continue with your application to this Gateways to Blue Skies. It's a great topic, and it's always fun to be at the forum. So looking forward to seeing interesting ideas come from all of you.
Yep, absolutely. Thanks, Kaushik. And here are some more important faces for the 2025 Blue Skies competition, your judging panel. These individuals comprise a group of subject matter experts in aviation and agriculture that bring the expertise necessary to thoroughly evaluate your proposed concepts. They are an enthusiastic bunch, eager to see what ideas you will present. Those on the November call will remember that Brad Dorn is serving as co-chair for this year's competition alongside Stephen. Brad couldn't be here today, so Cordelia Hires-Brady will be filling in for him. Cordelia, care to introduce yourself briefly?
Sure thing. My name is Cordelia Hires-Brady. Exactly like Amy said, I support Brad at NASA headquarters, where he is the program manager for the agriculture application area. So here to just assist with answering any questions to the best of my ability, and really looking forward to the proposals that are submitted. So exactly like you heard, please, we definitely encourage you to continue on and get those proposals submitted.
Thanks, Cordelia. I'm not sure if we have any other judges on the call, but if you are, please take this time to say hello.
I'll say hello. This is Craig Nickel. So I'm looking forward to being a judge. This will be my third time doing this. So thanks for everybody's participation. I'm looking forward to reading some great proposals.
Excellent. Thanks, Craig. All right. Thank you. Now we'll hand it over to Stephen to provide context for and an overview of the competition within UI and ARMD and why NASA is interested in doing this competition.
Sure. Thanks, Amy. So every year we choose a new topic that is relating to aviation, and we try to change it to keep it interesting for the students and to get new kinds of students from new places and new majors interested in our competition and interested in the new technologies that both we're developing and industry is developing to make airborne platforms in the future, faster, safer, quieter, and better for different types of applications. Agriculture is one of those applications that we see as an up and coming industry. And we know that people are already hard at work trying to come up with all sorts of new ways to utilize new technologies and new airborne platforms to make our agriculture sector better than maybe what it was before, maybe safer. And so we know that farmers are quick to adopt new technologies. And when people are quick and eager to adopt new technologies, there's a big opportunity space for everyone involved in the aviation side. So we decided after talking to a bunch of folks that this would be a great idea for the competition this year. While we're not going to tell you exactly what to do or what to integrate in your ideas, we're very interested in seeing what everybody comes up with.
Absolutely. Thanks, Stephen. And Cordelia, if you want to fill in a little bit more about the specifics for the 2025 theme, in case you want to add anything that NASA is working on now.
Well, honestly, I don't know that I want to add in too terribly much more, right? Because we don't want to push in any specific direction, but just share that Brad and I are both really excited, obviously, about the agriculture theme. NASA's been involved in agriculture for well over 50 years at this point. And so with us working in that program and working both domestically and internationally, thinking about food security, we're always really excited for new innovations and new technologies coming out within the space and are just excited to see what the teams come up with.
Thanks. And as I'm sure the teams are very aware, our theme this year is Aviation Solutions for Agriculture. So you will be conceptualizing novel aviation-related systems that can be applied to agriculture by 2035 or sooner with the goal of improving agriculture production, efficiency, environmental impact, and extreme weather climate resilience. We've encouraged teams to consider high potential technologies and systems that aren't currently mainstream or highly regarded as becoming mainstream in the future, and to imagine beyond applying sensors to aviation systems. So just like Cordelia said, innovation here, it's very important. So thank you, Stephen and Cordelia, for filling in there. So now we'll discuss the proposal and video expectations. We definitely just want to encourage you that the best source and single most important document in this competition is the competition guidelines. They will guide what you submit, how you submit, and how it is judged. They outline exactly what is expected in this competition, and we will encourage you to be sure you align your work with the guidelines. Occasionally there will be updates to this document, and they will be logged in the change log, which will be on the first page. For any significant changes to the guidelines, which are not anticipated, teams would receive a notification. Now I'll turn it over to Stephen to dive a little deeper into some specifics around teams' 2025 proposal submissions and what we're looking for.
As you might have already seen in the guidelines, if you've read them, this is not really a detailed design challenge. It is a high-level systems concept design challenge, right? So we want to know what your idea is for your system, kind of an overview of how it works, the technologies involved, the timeline to deployment for your idea. We want to see that you understand both the opportunity space that you are going to be using your concept in, right? What what niche is it going to go into? What problem is it solving? Is it something that people will be able to use easily, right? Is there training involved in various types of impact that it will have, or that, different things that will require to get to where it needs to go? Um, so there's a lot of things that we want people to consider, and you will have to make those tough decisions when you're making your concept of, I might not have room to put everything. How do I decide what's most important and get the point across to these judges, right, that are going to be reading my paper? So we don't need physical prototypes. We get people asking, and you might do it anyway if it's part of your senior design, but that's not part of this competition. Uh, but we do really want to see it from a high level and get the big picture of your idea.
Yep. Excellent. Thank you. Okay, so we have a few things for teams to keep in mind as you work toward your proposal writing and video making. Advisors must complete the advisor attestation form for the proposal submission to be valid. This is very important. This is one way your advisor must be involved in your project. Finalists will be selected from the proposal pool, and once selected, finalist teams will enter a new scoring period, which will begin with research paper and infographic and end with a presentation at the forum. As you see here on this chart, the next deadline is February 17th, and that's the proposal and video deadline. I know we sent out a survey, and we have seen that many of you do intend to submit a proposal, and we're very, very excited about that. Should you have any questions about anything between now and then, you can email us at blueskies@nianet.org. The next thing here is finalist selections will be made by March 14th, and finalists will have the next few months to complete a final research paper, infographic, and develop a presentation. The Blue Skies Forum will be held in California, May 20th through 21st. And it's important to know that when you submit your proposal and video, your team will be required to also submit a W-9 and ACH form for your university. This must be completed by your Office of Sponsored Programs, Finance Department, or a similar entity. Your university receives finalist funding directly, and then your advisor handles it on behalf of the team and university according to university protocols. So this is just another way in which your advisor must be involved. Finally, remember your research and justification are your keys to success. You are selling your proposed concept to the judges, so think of it as a sales pitch. And as you work towards that proposal, remember we have several resources readily available to you beyond the competition guidelines. We held a Q&A session back in November, and the recording of that session, the summary document, and presentation slides are all on the Blue Skies website at that link there at the bottom of the screen. The frequently asked questions page is on the Blue Skies website and very easily accessible. And the recording of this session, as well as a summary document and the slides, will also be available sometime later next week on the website for you to go back and look at. So lots of resources for you guys. All right, so with that, it's time to get going with the questions. Again, this is an open call question format, so please use the raise hand function within Microsoft Teams to get in the queue. When called on, we ask that you unmute your mic and turn on your camera if you feel comfortable to pose your question. We'll also take questions from the chat if you'd rather ask your question in the chat. Stephen, Cordelia, Stacy, and myself will be handling the bulk of the answers, but if there's any judges or sponsors on here that would like to handle any of them, they're welcome to chime in as well. All right. I see we have a question in the chat. Is there any way we can submit our proposal first to see if we're within the scope of the competition?
So usually we take a look at all of the NOIs. So if you submitted an NOI, it is likely that we took a look at that, and if it was not within the scope of the competition, we did send out a number of notifications to people that kind of might have been out of scope to let them know that they may want to consider other concept options. So if you haven't submitted an NOI to the email address for the competition at the NIA, please do so. And that would kind of give you that scope question answered. So
Thanks, Stephen. I see we have a question from Nate Hewson.
Hi, yeah. So on that previous slide talking about what you're expecting from the proposals, could you elaborate a little more on what you consider decisive and scoped? If you have some examples of some of the decisions or projects previously that weren't decisive and scoped, or something like that.
So I would answer this with saying, you know, we'll see it every year, right? But sometimes students, right, tend to write more about what the possibilities could be, right? Instead of saying, hey, we're gonna pick this type of system and use this system to do that. They might say, oh, well, maybe we could put any of these 10 systems on depending on what we want to do, but they're not actually picking anything, you know? So they're kind of leaving the options open for what their concept will be instead of telling us what their concept is going to be, right? So when teams are coming up with their concept, we want them to actually, pick, what kind of technology, what's the mission going to be, what's the purpose, right? Instead of just saying, you could do a lot of things with it, but we're not actually going down any one path as a group.
Awesome, thank you.
Thanks, Stephen. We'll go to a question in the chat and then back up to the person who has their hand raised. Let's see, we have, how should we weigh background information on agricultural techniques and the specific problem we're solving, as opposed to describing the aviation system?
So that's always going to be a challenge for, right, the teams, is deciding how much do I write about what, right? But you need to put enough in there that we who are reading it, who have never, been on your team before, understand, what the problem area is, what specific problem in that area you're solving, that we understand that you have done enough research in that background area to understand where you're coming from, and then also giving us enough information on your system to see how you're going to solve it, and all of the challenges associated with it that you're gonna bring up, right? Obviously, there's not room in a 5 to 7 page paper to write everything you ever want to write. So you kind of do need to pick what is going to best support your concept to us as the readers.
Thanks, Stephen. And looks like we have a question. Is it Charlie Burks or Burks Charlie? I'm having a hard time seeing the name.
Yes, it's Charlie Brooks.
All right, thanks.
Okay, hi. So I wanted to know how in-depth you all wanted our illustrations or graphics to be when it comes to our project as a whole. Do you want us to label things or just keep it plain and simple sketches, or do you want like CAD work?
So we don't expect CAD work. We always see some students doing CAD work just because some students, especially engineers, might be better at doing a CAD, right, to show us what their airplane or whatever type of thing it is. They might be better at CAD than like Adobe Photoshop or drawing or something, right? So kind of use whatever skills or tools that you have available to accurately represent whatever you're trying to show us, right? We don't have a specific requirement on what your pictures should look like. Obviously, we only want you to add images or graphs, etc., that add value to your proposal, right? That page space is valuable. So if you put something in there, it should be telling a story. So a lot of them, tend to have words or labels. Obviously, I don't necessarily need to know every single like if there's a computer chip or board on your airplane, where that's going to be and all of that, right? Because it's not a super detailed design that we're looking for, right? But you can also look, I think, at some of the things that people have submitted in the past, and take a look if you're curious about what kind of imaging, the images they've used, or what kind of drawings they've made.
Thank you.
All right, we have a few questions in the chat. The ACH request form and the W-9 vendor form. Can you please explain more what those forms are about and what their use is? Is the school's administration supposed to fill that out? See, Stacy, can I get you to?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to chime in on that one.
Thank you.
So, both of these forms are necessary for our side of the house. If your team is selected as a finalist, it's the way that we can get money to you. And that's a process that takes a little bit of time. And we want to make sure that we get your stipends to the finalist teams as soon as possible because there are some travel arrangements that need to be made very quickly after being selected. And so that's why we ask for them, so that we have those documents in hand and can get that stipend out to your university immediately after being selected. They are forms that your university is going to have to fill out. And usually that's somebody within the accounting or finance department. If you just go ask them who fills out, ACH forms and W-9 forms, they'll know. This is something that they do as a vendor for lots of different companies. So they should be able to quickly identify who that person is. But give yourself a little bit of time, at least a couple weeks before the proposal is due, which is right around now. Start making those inquiries about who needs to sign those so you have those in hand by the time you submit.
Thanks, Stacey. Now we'll switch over to, looks like Vivian has a question.
Apologies, I didn't have a question.
Oh, okay, no problem. We have another one in the chat. The rubric for the proposal and video states that we need university name, our name, team members, advisor name, etc. Do we need that on both the video and proposal, or can it just be on the proposal?
So
it needs to be on both. If the rubric calls for it, make sure that you are giving us exactly what we've asked for.
Yep. All right. Thank you. And then we've got another question. How much of a new concept is expected from us in this competition? Can we propose what scientists are researching right now? Of course, not fully the same.
So I would say if it's something that I, Google and find someone doing the exact same thing, then you're not really proposing anything new to us, right? And it's not really as much your idea, right? So we do ask teams to come up with something novel, and there are points for that in there. Something unique to your team, right? Some sort of change from something that either exists or something that doesn't exist at all. So that we really can get some novel ideas.
Excellent. Thanks, Stephen. All right. Another one in the chat. If we have multiple directions the design could take, can we explain each of those in the proposal, or should the design be more finalized?
So I think this kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier, right? If you're thinking about two different directions for what your concept could be, you should pick one of those directions so that we know what is your concept, right? Because if you have multiple directions you could take, then you kind of have multiple concepts. So we do want people to focus on a concept.
Great. Thanks, Stephen. Let's see. We have another question here from the chat. I know that there are examples of final deliverables available on the competition website. Examples of proposal papers from previous finalist teams that we can view.
I'll go ahead and answer that question. We get that question a lot, but unfortunately we do consider the proposals to be proprietary to your school, so we do not share any of the proposals with any of the existing teams. I can tell you that the final papers are kind of extensions of the original proposal, so that gives you a little insight, but we can't share an actual previous proposal.
Yeah, good question. All right, I don't see any other questions in the chat right now. Let's see, anybody with their hand raised? This is the time to take advantage of. We got our experts here. Oh, there we go. Nate has another question. What do you got, Nate?
Yeah, I was wondering, like in depth, you were wanting us to go into on some of the technical concepts behind our ideas. Are you wanting us to show some equations and some physical principles, maybe some examples in the proposal paper or maybe the appendix?
Can you repeat that?
Oh, so I was wondering how in-depth we're supposed to go in some of the physical principles and kind of the technical background behind our concept. Like, are you looking for equations and maybe sample calculations that show that the physical principles we're using to run our system are valid and accurate? Or are you looking more for like a mention and maybe a citation, or do you want those calculations in the appendix?
So yeah, it depends on what it is. And every year we might see some calculations that people might put in their appendix for saying, hey, this is an estimate of how much this proposed system would cost to either, produce or develop. Things like that are okay to maybe put in your appendix, since that you'd have to come up with something like that if you were, coming up with some numbers like that to justify your concept. But you don't have to, prove physics to us, right? We do expect people to cite their research, right? And so, right, if you have some sort of physics principle or engineering principle that supports your idea, you would probably mention it in reference, supporting documentation, but we don't expect you to take up your valuable page space with a bunch of equations.
Thank you.
And I apologize, but I missed a question from Connor earlier on in the chat. He asked, could you elaborate on not needing detailed aircraft design studies?
Yeah, so I mean, if you've ever participated in anything like a design, build, fly, right? Like, we don't expect or need people to CAD things, right? People might use CAD to draw, but we don't need to know all the nitty gritty of, what are all of the sizes of each piece of this aircraft, right? We don't, like, you don't have to do a very detailed weight if you even give us a weight at all, right? Some other competitions ask you to go really more into the design aspect, right? As if you were going to build it yourself, which is a little bit kind of a more low depth than we're asking for, right? Since this is kind of a systems level competition. I'm not sure if that answers your question.
And we have a follow-up to the previous question regarding looking at proposals. This question is, what if the previous proposal is from our school?
And I'll jump in there again. Yeah, unfortunately, neither NASA nor NIA can share any of the proposals with any other team, even if it is a team from the same university. But if you do have a team from your university who has been a finalist before, you can see the faculty and team leads' names listed on their final papers. You're welcome to reach out to them and ask them if they'd like to share it with you, but NASA or NIA cannot do that. And then it looked like Maxwell also had a clarification to a previous question. He says, when I asked about the different directions it could take, I was more referring to the smaller technical aspects of the proposed system. Could we explore those in the proposal as options for the overall system?
Do you have any, I mean, I don't know if you want, can you give a similar example without giving away what you might be talking about more exactly, kind of smaller technical aspects of a proposed system?
Maxwell, you could feel free to unmute yourself and chime in there.
Hi, sorry. Yeah. Maybe like, for example, if we wanted to decide what kind of communication systems it's using, like radio or cellular or something like that. Just giving the pros and cons within the proposal.
I mean, so we don't. You definitely could say, right? I mean, we are going to use, an appropriate, some sort of one of these appropriate communication systems. Um, I'm not sure if the reason you don't want to choose is because you're not sure what the best one will be given whatever you end up using it for, or if it's more of a customer need thing. I would, implore people to, talk to people who might be end users and say, hey, well, what, if you're going to use this system, if I had to decide between these types of things, which one would you choose, right? And you might also consider things like how easy is it to work with or learn? Is it kind of extensible to future needs? Is it things that require other types of approvals? If sometimes, right, if it's communications, you might have to go through different types of authorities to use certain types of communication systems, or there might be interference given whatever type of operating conditions you're using, right? So there's lots of different things you can consider. And you really want to take all those things into consideration when you do end up picking one, if it only ends up having one on board.
Thank you.
Nate, did you have another question?
Yes. I'm curious about the content that you would prefer to see in the appendix versus the body of the proposal. Are you wanting like all visual aids and graphics in the appendix as opposed to in the actual body of the proposal, so that 5 to 7 pages is entirely text with citations going to the appendix?
We don't want,
Go ahead.
according to the guidelines, we don't want anything in the appendix really except for resources cited or references. Anything that you want the judges to look at needs to be not in the appendices, because they aren't required to review the appendices. So they're only going to judge you on what's in the 5 to 7 pages.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Anybody else right now? To kind of piggyback on that question, we had a question from the first Q&A that someone had asked that could be helpful in case you weren't on the call in November, and that was, what defining feature has set winning teams apart from others? And we would say that the winning teams tend to have solid deliverables across the board. So that's their proposals, videos, infographics, presentations. They not only complete all requirements of the competition, but they also often are innovating with today's technologies or pushing the boundaries of what could be done by the target date listed in the competition guidelines, which is 2035 or sooner.
Going off of the question in the chat, the scope of the proposal is not limited to the US. You might get questions, right, based on what place you choose, if you're choosing a target area for your proposal. Obviously, as far as teams go, right, the teams should be teams from US institutions, but the potential application area of your concept does not have to be necessarily within the US.
Thanks, Stephen. Nate?
Yeah, thinking about the guidelines for the project and how our goal is to develop a technology that improves agriculture, is increasing accessibility and lowering cost for farmers with our technology a valid approach or a valid improvement? If our technology isn't doing something completely unheard of, that might be done in the industry right now, finding a way to do it cheaper and easier for people, is that a valid approach within the scope?
So I would say it depends, but in general, right, we want people to make these improvements via airborne platforms, right, using aviation and new technology. So if you can make an improvement that might save people in ag time, money, etc. Right, some benefit that would be worth the investment in this aviation system, then that seems like a valid, a valid idea there. What we don't want is we don't want people making things, on an airborne platform just for the sake of because we're asking them to put it on an airborne platform, right? If there's no real business case or rhyme or reason that it should be on an airborne platform, we'll probably notice that in your proposal.
Thank you.
And I'm sure farmers would appreciate lowered costs. Sure.
Absolutely.
Any other questions? Going once? Go. We've got a question from Kaylee in the chat. Is the proposal in video form different from submitting the video and proposal? Kaylee, can you elaborate on that? We only have one submission form that includes both the proposal and the video on that one form.
Yeah, I can elaborate. So from the Blue Skies big outline document, it says that there's one section that talks about submitting the proposal and video evaluation criteria, and then there's the part where it says the following information will be requested on the proposal and video submission form. So I just wanted to know if we needed like a separate form and we're submitting it all at once, and on that form you need all of the requirements that it's listed under, or if it's just kind of submitted all as one thing, and I just don't know how much clarity there is on that. Could you just explain that a little bit? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So, and I'll actually drop a link here in just a second into the chat that has the actual form, so you can go and look at it and you can see all of the different fields that it'll ask you for. So much of what you see bulleted in the guidelines where it says it's going to ask for your team names and their academic discipline and those sorts of things, those are going to be separate fields within the form that you fill out. And then there'll be a place for you actually to upload that 5 to 7 page PDF version of your proposal. So that will all be on the same form, but you don't have to have all of those little bulleted items listed within your actual proposal. So let me find that link for you and I'll drop it in there and you can take a peek at it, and that might make a little bit more sense.
Cool, thanks, Stacey. Samuel has a question. What should we consider when including anecdotes from farmers and ag tech business representatives in our proposal? Is this good to include? Does it belong in the proposal?
So when you're talking to people in the industry, right, that might prove that there's some sort of need in there, right? It might give you justification for why you chose to use certain types of systems, right? Like we were saying earlier, if some sort of comms is used and you're trying to decide between multiple types of comms, say, hey, well, maybe this type of comms is more compatible with what they already do, or whatever your target user case is. So there's different ways you can use the information from them. We don't expect you necessarily to write a paragraph that is just verbatim telling us what they said, right? We want you to use the information you gain from, whatever resources you read about or any people you talk to inform your decision making. And you can, talk about where your information is from as well when you're using that as justification in your proposal, if that answers your question.
Thanks, Stephen. I see a hand up. Is it Saida?
Yes, I just wanted to make sure we need to put estimated prices, right? For the stuff, like,
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? I'm having a little trouble hearing you.
oh, like, do we need to put estimated price on our proposal of the technology?
an estimated price of the technology?
Yes. Or is that something like not?
So we do see people regularly talk about, right, what it might cost to have a system, right? Because if you propose something with a bunch of very expensive or potentially expensive components in 2035 on a system, right, it might be hard for the judges or readers to understand how this would be viable if a farmer couldn't afford one or however many they might need for this system, or if it's if the maintenance is too expensive, right? Things like that are things that we always want teams to think about, right? Since kind of part of the justification is making sure that there's like a business case closing, and that someone might use this, right? Because if no one's going to use this, then the feasibility kind of comes down.
Thanks, Stephen. Any other questions? Okay, going once. I'll do what Stacey did. Going once. Going twice. All right, well, not seeing any more questions. We'll go ahead and wrap up a few things. We'll be getting this Q&A recording up into the website for viewing, as I said earlier, sometime next week, and we'll send out an email so that everybody knows that it's available. You'll also see these Q&A slides and the summary documents updated with the questions received on the call. And it will take us a few days to get that uploaded, but like I said, we'll notify you as soon as that is possible. And then you'll see our email address up there if you have any questions, or if you have a team member that had a question that couldn't be on the call, feel free to have them send us an email. And I just want to say thanks for being here and for asking some great questions, and thanks to Stephen and Cordelia for spending time with us this afternoon, and for our sponsors, and our judge was on. And we truly look forward to seeing your proposals on or before February 17th. We're super interested in the aviation concepts that have been presented in your NOIs, and excited to see how you research and justify them in your proposal. So again, thank you. Good luck. And with that, we'll close. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks all.